There's all kinds of great advice for building wealth and living well out there. But you're done. You're retired or you're about to retire. You've done all the saving. You've done all the heavy lifting. You've done all the hard work. And hopefully you've got a nice nest egg and you're out of debt, or mostly out of debt. I know some of you are still arbitraging an awesome mortgage rate from back in the good old days. But you've also kind of figured out what your lifestyle is going to be. And you've kind of got your expectations set for what retirement will look like income-wise. But how do you know how much you have to be able to give? Well, if you have a money question or a money problem, the answer is probably give more. I'm Jason Demland. Welcome to Give More. Today, I want to talk about the 5 uses of money in retirement and how give should guide all of them. Ron Blue and the Kingdom Advisors, of which I am one, teach 5 uses of money framework. And there's only 5 things you can do with your money at any time, and they're all in tension, they're all competing, and it's all happening at the same time. That's why sometimes you may have had some money stress in your life. Those 5 uses of money are live, give, grow, owe taxes, and owe debt. I think give ought to be the category that we prioritize so that it informs what we should do with those other uses of money. The Bible is clear about giving. It teaches giving of your first fruits. And in the New Covenant, it implies a percent giving. There's giving in proportion to your means. And the letter to the Corinthians, Paul writes to them and just advises them to take up a collection. The first day of the week, they should set money aside for the work of the local church so they didn't have to come and ask all the time. So we're also implying that giving is regular and proportionate. But our culture is pretty different about giving. Usually, I went through those 5 uses of money, and rather than have give first, in our culture, it's usually live. You prioritize your living expenses first. Then you further prioritize your living expenses by borrowing from the future. You finance that, so debt. So we're owing debt, live, owe debt. Then you have to pay taxes because you can't escape taxes, right? Even if you die, you still owe taxes. So live, owe taxes, owe debt, owe taxes. So we're at live, owe. And then in our culture, we know it's important to save. So hopefully we've forced it, but if there's anything left over, we'll save because we know we should save for the later. That's the grow phase of the 5 uses of money. And then even after that, we'll maybe try to scrounge something together to give. While you're working and trying to get ahead in your younger years, you probably struggled. I've heard it from most of my clients, very successful clients now, and it's kind of a rite of passage for a lot of folks, especially you're young and married, you don't make a lot of money, and you just make things work. You struggle to make ends meet. It's really, really hard to save, and it's really, really hard to give then too. It's a bit of a catch-22, because when's the best time to start saving so you can take advantage of compound interest? Well, it's when you're young, but that's also the hardest time, right? Because you have little expenses like furnaces and diapers and food and electricity, those kinds of important things that are getting in the way. That's the 5 uses of money, all in tension all the time. Those living expenses are pretty important. So they do take priority over growing and giving. But later, as you get more successful in your career, you are usually able to save. And for most people that I run into, it's those last 10 years before retirement that you really start making really big headway saving. You're making more money than you've ever made, and that's when you start saving. That's also when people tend to be a little bit more generous. But if you weren't regularly giving when you were struggling, when you were younger, if that wasn't a part of your DNA, that regular giving, it's really hard to change that later on. So now you have more money, more disposable income, and more money to save, and you really feel behind the 8 ball and you need to save. Giving can be sacrificed there. But you can still do it then too. And people that build a habit of giving, 10 years before retirement usually are more prone to be more generous in retirement. That's why I say giving breaks the power of money. Once you start doing it, it just becomes a part of you. You start to reap the rewards of it, and you understand that giving is a part of your stewardship. And if you're prioritizing it, it results in better financial stewardship. Giving breaks the power of money and forces you to be a better financial steward. That's why when you're in your accumulating years, I really recommend that you do a set percent of giving of your income every week. The great thing about that is, in your younger years, giving a set percent of your income, if it's not very much, isn't that much money. And then if you started early, as your income grows, the amount that you give grows proportionally with it, and you've really gotten through it. But that's kind of the same problem as not starting saving way back when you were younger. Now we have to build these habits up later when the stakes seem a lot higher, when 10% of $30,000 is a lot less money than 10% of $3 million. And I've seen this play out again and again. Having more money doesn't correlate exactly with giving more money, or at least in the same proportion in retirement. And there's research that backs this up too. Most of the giving that is done is bent at the end of the curve by some really, really generous givers that don't have very much income. Maybe that's you. That is the person that has a large net worth, that is drawing a modest income for their lifestyle because they're compared to their net worth. They're able to give a lot away as a percent of their income when you figure it up that way. But most people don't. Most people are stuck in that lower percent giving. I know from experience that most retirees' primary concern is running out of money in retirement, and that's a really valid concern. It's a switch, a shift. You've been working your whole life. You can withstand market volatility, ups and downs, those bear markets, those bull markets, recessions, and these booms that we've had. It's fine. You like the booms, they're great, and sometimes you get scared in the bear markets anyway while you're working, but while you're working, usually you have a longer term outlook. You think, I'm going to work for 20 more years, I can be aggressive. I'm going to work for 10 more years, I can be aggressive. But when you get close to retirement, your thinking starts to shift and you kind of move from maybe more of an abundance mindset to a scarcity mindset. And if you do that, now in retirement, it kind of starts a vicious cycle. Now you're more conservative, you're worried about running out of money, so your investments aren't as aggressive, or they're not probably going to grow as much, which means you don't have as much to live off of, but it means even more that you don't have as much to give, especially if you have kind of this worldly prioritization of the 5 uses of money. If give is last, well, what do you think will be the first use of money you'll scrap if you're feeling really worried about market performance or your financial plan in retirement? It's going to be give. So if you haven't cultivated a habit of giving and giving first and giving generously, then I think your whole retirement plan could get out of whack and then short you on the total impact your portfolio could have or the total amount of growth it could have. Maybe you're thinking, I can feel you thinking this because my clients do all the time. Like, Jason, wow, that sounds like a great idea. I'm glad you're so excited about me giving my money away. But don't you think it's a good idea that I prioritize my living expenses so that I don't become a burden on other people? Great point. Making sure you don't run out of money is a very important part of retirement planning. But if it's the main place you go or the only place you go, you're going to get all out of whack. Proverbs 3:9 says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce." And that snippet of biblical wisdom applies even in retirement. Give more exists as a philosophy because starting with giving in retirement changes how you look at money. And it's every bit as important in retirement as it is in your working years. If you've been giving during your working years and giving generously, the transition into retirement's a lot easier to be generous, and I get that. But sometimes when you go to retirement, it does make you worry. And if that worrying leads to being less generous, that's a big mistake. Now, there's no law for giving. There's no obligation. I'm not obliging you for giving. This might seem like a guilt trip. Sometimes I feel like I want to give people a guilt trip. But hear this. You've probably heard that God loves a cheerful giver, right? And maybe you've heard some prosperity teaching. I'm also not going to hit you with that if you give, you will get. There is no guarantee for financial success from generosity. There's no guarantee for physical health from generosity. You give to your church, you give to the pastor, that doesn't mean you're not going to get cancer and die. It doesn't mean you're going to avoid suffering, no matter what the prosperity teachers tell you. But I'll tell you what you do get: joy. We've heard that God loves a cheerful giver in 2 Corinthians. You probably heard that a lot. Maybe your pastor said it a lot. Sometimes we miss out on the follow-up. So I like context. Let's get a little more context. Bear with me. I'm going to read some scripture here. Hear the word of God. This is 2 Corinthians 9, verse 10, picking up after the cheerful giver section. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. For the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of saints, but is also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. By their approval of this service, they will glorify God because of your submission that comes from your confession of the gospel of Christ and the generosity of your contribution for them and for all the others. While they long for you and pray for you, because of the surpassing grace of God upon you, thanks be to God for his inexpressible gift. If you heard that passage and you thought, cool, I'll give my money away so that God gives me even more and an even better life, then you've missed the point. God may reward your giving with financial prosperity. That's his prerogative. But that's not the promise that's here. So eager giving deepens and enhances, draws us closer to the experience of our relationship with God. It's a way that we mirror his generosity to us. He gave us his son, Jesus Christ, and redeemed us. And we give out of joyful response. Giving is maybe the chief way that we experience joy. And if you are worrying about your money and not giving, you're robbing yourself of joy. So we start with give first when we're doing retirement planning and these 5 uses of money because it kind of calibrates the rest. It informs us on live, how much we need to live on, what our financial finish lines are. It kind of calibrates our grow too. It'll help us inform our investment choices and asset allocation. It also informs owing taxes because we can diffuse a tax time bomb in retirement with charitable giving. They go together really, really well. And I get really excited about that because thank God we live in a country that incentivizes charitable giving. And we can give to the ministry of the gospel. And this also, starting with give first, kind of demonizes debt. I'm gonna keep working on that. There's a good joke there. When I sit down with a couple that's retiring or with a single person that's working through retirement, some of the first questions I want to ask really have to do with values, with what you believe about money. And I'm trying to get really good at asking high value questions. I still talk too much and I want to listen more. But when I ask really good questions, we can get some really rich answers that are really telling. Like, let me ask you, what's your first memory of money? First memory you have of money? Or why is money important to you? What's the first picture that pops into your head when I say money? How about this? Like we can Christianize it some more. Like if you believe that you should be a steward, that this is not your money, that this is somebody else's, namely God's, how would you handle it differently? How would you go back looking at how you've handled money and handle it differently? Or how will you know? Let's say we're 10 years from now, looking back on, the last 10 years starting now. What will you see that lets you know that you were successful? I ultimately want to know how much is enough for them. This is the live section of Live, Give, Grow. How much is enough? Where's your financial finish line? Because this is really deep. This is different for everybody. It depends on the day even how much is enough because you're all over the place. But if we can set some actual boundaries, we do want to take care of food, clothing, shelter, and enjoyment of life too. But we also want to steward this money for the kingdom, for the ministry of the gospel. And this framework all helps us keep enough, how much to live, in focus. We don't want to get crazy. We don't want to be destitute either. I'm not advocating for living a life of poverty and running off to join a monastery and hit yourself in the head with a piece of wooden board. I want you to enjoy life. But it takes a little bit of thinking to think how much is enough for you to enjoy life. Give calibrates the grow section of these 5 uses of money as well. And the grow part is what most people see a financial advisor for first. At least I've seen that in my own experience. I think it's becoming less and less as we all actually focus on financial planning as the value that gets served. But people still go to investment advisors first because investments are complicated and investments are really, really important, especially when you're in retirement. The things that you need to figure out in there are, what your asset allocation should be, how much should be in stocks and bonds and fixed income ladders, CDs, money markets, and what's a safe withdrawal rate and where are you going to take the money from first. Asset location matters a lot too, depending on the types of tax qualified accounts you have and all of that. But Give kind of calibrates this, because if we are just looking to not run out of money for our living expenses, that asset allocation is going to look a lot different than if we are building in really generous giving as well. We might take maybe some more risk or have some more high growth options, or we may change how the asset allocation is in a taxable account versus a tax deferred account. There's a whole lot that goes into all of that. And I would joke with clients all the time that we can build a perfect financial plan if you tell me exactly how much you're going to spend and when exactly you're going to die. But that's why it's funny. We don't know when we're going to die. We're pretty sure that we're going to die, memento mori, but you can't say the day. And you shouldn't. We should plan for a very long time horizon with a lot of generosity. And that kind of informs our asset allocation in this grow bucket. You can kind of see how all of these things are intertwined and all playing off of each other though. And this grow philosophy and asset allocation and distribution strategy, those are all episodes on their own and they're coming. I'm going to do them. I really like talking about that. Probably what I'm most excited about is how give informs owing taxes. If we've got a good philosophy on giving, we can save a lot of money on taxes that maybe we'd otherwise be paying. Now, I never advise people to give just to save money on taxes. That doesn't usually work out. Almost always, well, we just said in 2 Corinthians, you don't give to get a financial reward. And I think sometimes people sell this tax planning as a way to have more money. No, I don't think you're going to. Really, it comes down to your money is going to go to the IRS or it's going to go to charities that you like. And actually, when we're doing most of these charitable giving plans, you, the client, the person doing the giving and the tax paying, usually nets less money overall when you're really charitable than if you just kept it all and then paid as little taxes as possible on it. So you're still going to end up with net less money, but because of the amount in taxes saved with some of these strategies, I've seen lots of money go to ministries that maybe they otherwise would not have been able to get the money for. Some of these tax strategies that exist, we've got donor advised funds, or a very simple one, qualified charitable distributions straight from an IRA after your qualified age to the charity of choice, your local church. You can batch tithes. Like we're in retirement and you plan to give 10% of income and we figured out how much is enough. We can go ahead and take 10 years worth of tithes, donate that all to a donor advised fund right now, get a huge tax deduction in that current year, and then you just give while it grows out of the donor advised fund every year to your church, or every month, or every week, or however you set it up. We can pair that all up with Roth conversion strategies that might make sense for you, or capital gains loss harvesting. We can do gifts of appreciated securities to different charities or to your own donor advised fund, or we can do gifts of maybe a business interest that you own. Commodities. There's so many things to do with tax planning if you have a giving first lens. And it is a lot of fun. Finally, having a give first philosophy demonizes debt. Debt is bad. Debt is an obligation that you have to pay, that you borrowed against future income for. And that's really palpable when you flip the switch into retirement. That feels stressful. Do you remember mortgage burning parties? Maybe the demographic watching this knows that. I don't. But mortgage that used to be a real thing. You would pay off your mortgage, you get the mortgage papers, You'd invite the neighbors over, you'd have your family over. It feels like an It's a Wonderful Life kind of thing. And you'd literally set the papers on fire. That's so cool. We don't do that anymore. Maybe it's because we don't have paper as much. I think there's another reason. But Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies found that over the last 30 years, the share of homeowners 65 to 79 that had a mortgage went from about 1 in 4 to 4 in 10. So that's almost double. And then for folks that are 80 years and older, if we were just one generation ago, only 3% of those folks had a mortgage, and now it's 31%. 3% to 31%. Why do you think that is? Well, I think one of the obvious reasons for that is probably the historically low interest rate environment that we've had for the last 15 or 20 years. Well, I think it's wise to retire without a mortgage. And I know the math says that if your mortgage rate is 2.5% right now, you can get a T-bill, which is the most secure investment that exists with a guaranteed rate. I don't know what the rates are right now. We'll just say they're more than that. That way this episode lasts. You're basically being paid to keep your mortgage if you just go ahead and take the money you would have used to pay off your mortgage and stick it in T-bills. That's arbitrage, and that's the financially correct answer. But I still think paying off your mortgage is a good idea. I have never, ever, ever had somebody get a hold of me and tell me we had a great asset allocation portfolio event. I'm so psyched that we got our asset allocation in line, or to get our trailing 12 months dividends were more than expected, Jason. This is amazing. Never happened. But I have had people bursting at the seams to tell me that they've paid off their mortgage. It's happened quite a few times now in my career, and it's awesome. There is something about it. I can't quantify it. It's not able to be quantified in numbers. So if you're a robot out there, you're very, engineering focused, I get it. I'm not going to be mad at you for not paying your mortgage off. It makes sense. But I'm going to encourage you to, because there's just something special about not owing anything to anyone. There's a caveat, though. You got to pay if you're going to pay off your mortgage. You need to do it smart. You don't want to incur a bunch of taxes because you took a bunch of money out of your IRA or 401k plan. So do it smart. Talk to a tax planner. Talk to a financial advisor, because you can, like, those big lump sum payoffs can cause problems. But generally, I'm in favor of it. Over this past year, which of the 5 uses of money, live, give, owe taxes, owe debt, grow, have you prioritized? I think if you look at your tax return and your bank statements for the past year, you can figure it out. Go ahead and put a number on each of them about which ones you prioritize in your head. And then you can go ahead and do the math and put a percent on each of those 5 categories, how much you spent in each of those categories for the past year. In financial planning, you really have to figure out where we are right now versus where we want to be. And we have to have an honest starting point. And we're not really after hitting a certain percent in each of those, except for debt. I really want that to be 0%. You're probably going to have a number in each of the other ones. But those numbers, I don't have a rule of thumb of what's great for you for each of those. You do, though. And that's between you and God. And that's what we're really after is changing the heart and making sure your treasure's in the right spot, because where your treasure is, your heart is also. And next episode, we're going to talk about how much should I give? So that'll kind of answer those questions, at least from what I think. Make sure you subscribe, and I hope you guys have a great one. Soli Deo Gloria.